and to me it feels like, the idea that we've been sold, this commercial feminism that you see on every bookshelf and in every Instagram post at the moment is kind of all about expanding choice and, maximizing that idea of freedom of, you are a woman if you have absolutely all the choices in the known and unknown universe, and that these choices expand with every day. So I wonder what your relationship is to the idea of freedom. Like, what is freedom to you in light of all of this exploration that you've done?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I think about it quite a lot because, you're absolutely right. Like this kind of promise of infinite freedom is also responsible for the sort of delusional ideas that you can like break free of your body, that you can escape death. Kind of this virtual fantasy of like freedom in that model is like freedom from any constraint whatsoever. But the older models of like liberty and so on are actually about understanding your own desires precisely so you're not controlled by them. So freedom is freedom from domination, but including your own negative tendencies, whereas kind of consumer capitalism basically implores you to go mental with your desires and say, like, well, if you like donuts, you can eat 7,000 donuts a week or whatever if you want to. Like, and that's what you should do because, what you want is good. But actually, most of what human beings want is not good. It's not good for them. It's not good for other people. It's not good for the social whole. So, and obviously we're beyond that sort of idea of virtue or, consumer capitalist societies are also post-religious in many ways. Obviously people still go to church and practice religion, but, largely they're not dominated by religious ideas, which might include ideas of constraint and the common good. And, so, I mean, I think there's an interesting move towards a kind of post-liberal politics, which in a way goes beyond the left and right distinction. I mean, I agree that there is a kind of, there's actually like a long history of a right-wing opposition to capitalism. And I think you see it in people like Junger and others. And it's very obvious that, consumer capitalism is a very narrow and restricting image of existence. I mean, it's one that doesn't fulfill a lot of things, and of course, then lots of ideas of like myth and other kinds of belonging can come to fill in that gap. And so I think I wouldn't necessarily call kind of Illich and Agamben left or right. Simply speaking, I think that there is a kind of position which is beyond that distinction as we would commonly understand it. That forms actually a very, very interesting and important opposition to the regime, right? So like if we think of the regime just being the material world and the world as we're supposed to see and accept it, the other side of that would be like a spiritual dimension or a philosophical dimension or imagining a world not in a kind of utopian communist way, like, oh, if only we could get there, then everything would be great. But rather from within that regime, thinking about other ways of thinking about things that are like missing or being taken away, that have a kind of enchanted or spiritual dimension, I suppose, how to put it. Like, and sort of noticing the kind of ideological formations that are dominating our society. So whether we're talking about biopolitics and this idea of like, security or safety or all of these terms that have come to dominate a particular way of treating populations. So, you mentioned, Illich, Agamben and Lasch, and I suppose there is a religious dimension to at least some of those thinkers. And I'm interested increasingly in that because I think that human beings, it's very, very hard for people to live without religion. I think the liberal idea as it came to be enacted, that in a way everyone has to kind of decide for themselves what their morality is actually an enormous ask of people. And I think it's apt to go extremely wrong, which is why you have very high levels of like addiction and atomization and anomie, and this is a very common post-liberal claim. So I'm very interested in people like Alistair McIntyre, and again he's someone who's very hard to position as either left or right in a certain way. It's tapping into different traditions and different ways of seeing thought and action and morality that are almost like pre-enlightenmental but not necessarily reactionary.